The footage presented from Fright Night originates from a fictional horror film. Any references to violence or mature content are purely fictional. All actions are executed by a professional cast and crew. The footage is intended solely for commentary and analytical purposes. Fright Night is a 1985 American supernatural horror flick that centers around a teenager named Charlie Brewster. He realizes that his neighbor Jerry Dandridge is actually a vampire. When no one believes his wild claims, Charlie turns to Peter Vincent, a TV host known for playing a vampire hunter in movies, to help him put an end to Jerry's murderous rampage. Production. Development. While working on the script for Cloak and Dagger, Tom Holland had a bit of fun imagining a horror movie enthusiast who becomes convinced that his neighbor is a vampire. At first, he thought this idea might not be enough to carry a full story.
What's he gonna do?
Holland asked.
Because everybody's gonna think he's mad.
The story percolated in his mind for a year, and finally one day while discussing it with John Byers, then the head of story department at Columbia Pictures, he finally figured out what the boy would do.
Of course he's gonna go to Vincent Price.
Back in the day, a bunch of local TV stations across the U.S. had their own horror hosts like Zachary, Svengoolie, and the famous Elvira. So Holland thought it made sense for the kid to turn to his local host for help.
I have a great deal of affection for the vampire myth, for the genre. The genre died out because they couldn't update it. And I wanted to bring it back. And this was the first story that really contemporized it.
McDowell was really curious about how the character came to be.
In the film, I perform as being in my late 20s or early 30s in the film. Clips of my old movies all the way up to my 60s. And I'm the washed-up has-been.
McDowell mentioned that he was drawn to the role because it caught his interest.
I'd never played anything that old.
Holland and McDowell formed a strong friendship, and eventually, McDowell invited Holland to a dinner party. There, he introduced him to Vincent Price, who was quite pleased to learn that the role was a nod to him and mentioned something about the film.
Was wonderful, and he thought Roddy did a wonderful job.
Chris Sarandon's agent handed him the script and he got back to them with a response.
There's no way I can do a horror movie.
He chose to take a quick look at the script and was instantly hooked by it.
I thought this is one of the best scripts I've read in a long time.
Sarandon mentioned it.
Beautifully constructed, it was obvious that this was a labor of love. It was clear that the writer/director's approach to it was one of wanting to have fun with the genre without making fun of it. The characters were beautifully drawn.
Sarandon had concerns about getting stuck in the villain role, but he connected with the script since the story had more depth than your typical monster flick.
Forgetting about vampirism, what this film is about on one level is an older man trying to take a younger man's girl away from him.
Holland mentioned that even though he was into the screenplay, Sarandon had some reservations about teaming up with a first-time director. To ease his mind, he hopped on a flight to Los Angeles to meet Tom Holland and producer Herb Jaffe. Right off the bat, Sarandon and Holland clicked, leading to them collaborating on several more projects down the line. Sarandon was really impressed by how thoroughly Holland had everything planned out for the film. Literally described the movie shot by shot all the way through, page by page, scene by scene. It was basically the way he shot it.
And action. writer-director Tom Holland's fascination and affection for the vampire story, updated to 1985, is evident in his new film from Columbia Pictures, Fright Night.
Charlie, this is our next-door neighbor, Jerry Dandridge.
Hello, Charlie.
Jonathan Stark wasn't really into vampire movies, but he found the script pretty interesting. The character of Billy Cole was described as a massive guy, so Stark bulked up with some extra layers when he showed up for the audition. During the auditions, he performed the scene where he's being interrogated by the detective, which was meant to be serious.
I'm thinking, if I'm sitting there being evil, the lieutenant's gonna get suspicious. Why not throw him off the trail by being funny?
Holland was really into his interpretation of the character, and Stark got the green light for the role. But since he auditioned early in the process, there was a long wait before filming started, which made Stark anxious about possibly losing the part. On the bright side, that delay allowed him to hit the gym and bulk up, so he wouldn't need any padding for the film. William Ragsdale tried out for the role of Rocky Dennis in Mask, but ended up losing it to Eric Stoltz. However, casting director Jackie Birch remembered him and thought he'd be perfect for Charlie Brewster. After several auditions, Ragsdale found out he got the role on Halloween night in 1984, outshining other future stars like Charlie Sheen. Stephen Jeffries had a bit of a mix-up during his audition for Anthony Michael Hall's part in Weird Science, but he made a lasting impression on Jackie Birch, who then recommended him for Fright Night. Even though he wasn't a big horror fan, Jeffries loved the script and quickly called his agent, excitedly saying he wanted to audition for Charlie Brewster.
No, Steve.
His agent responded.
You're wanted for the part of Evil Ed.
Jeffries felt a mix of confusion and sadness all at once.
What do they see in me that they think I should be this? Well, anyway, it worked out.
Casting Amy Peterson was the toughest role to fill.
There wasn't the perfect girl next door until Amanda Burst walked in,
Holland mentioned. Pre-production. After getting the cast set, Holland took feedback from all the actors and made a bunch of tweaks to the script. Some changes were minor, while others were pretty significant, like the ending where Peter Vincent was supposed to turn into a vampire when he went back to host Fright Night. The draft from September 6, 1984, which you can find online, is pretty close to what ended up in the final film, but there were still a few adjustments to make. The cast and crew enjoyed a nice 2-week rehearsal period in late November 1984 before they started filming. Holland mapped out the scenes on a soundstage, and the cast went through the whole movie as if it were a stage play. Since he started out as a classically trained actor, Holland encouraged everyone to write up backstories for their characters to really get into their heads and understand their motivations while shooting. They worked out all the story and performance issues during rehearsal, so when it was time to film, Holland only needed 2 or 3 takes for each scene before moving on. Originally, Jerry Dandridge was written as a more straightforward villain, but Sarandon looked for ways to add depth to the vampire.
I wanted to give the audience something to hold on to in terms of understanding that this was someone who was, at one time, and still is in certain respects, a thinking, feeling human being.
Sarandon commented.
This is a man who's been hunted for all his post-human existence, but who has fallen in love a number of times, and who, in a sense, longs for a normal existence.
We were very attracted to him because he gave us the qualities that we really wanted in the vampire. And in this particular role, we wanted him to be dark, to be sinister, at the same time extremely attractive, physically and sexy. And when you see the film, you'll see that all of those things have been realized.
Sarandon looked into bats and found out that a large portion of bat species mainly eat fruit, leading him to that conclusion.
Jerry had a lot of fruit bat in his DNA.
His character often chomps on apples, which Sarandon thought was a way for him to cleanse his palate after feasting on his victim's blood. Stark and Sarandon didn't catch the gay subtext that Holland had in mind while they were working on their characters.
I didn't have any sense of it as being anything other than Renfield and Dracula.
Chris Sarandon remembered.
I think there was sort of an asexual quality to the relationship that was sort of borderline homoerotic, but not in the sense that it was creepy.
In the moment when Jerry yanks down the window shade, it seems like Billy is getting ready to give him oral sex, Stark recalled.
I'm cleaning his hand, and Tom Holland said,
"No, get down on your knees."
Hey, Tom. Then when I saw the film, I thought, ooh, okay.
McDowell put in a ton of effort into his character and intentionally modeled his performance after the cowardly lion from The Wizard of Oz.
My part is that of an old ham actor, a dreadful actor. He realizes it but doesn't admit it. He had a moderate success in isolated film here and there, but all very bad product. This poor son of a bitch just played the same character all the time, which was awful. And then he disappeared from sight 15 years beforehand. He'd been peddling these movies to late-night TV, various syndicated markets. He'd go 6 months in Iowa, 6 months in Podunk.
McDowell shared his thoughts with Fangoria.
He's got such a sad life, he's sort of cowardly. And then he finds his strength as a human being.
Even though he was playing a pretty sad character, McDowell was a rock for the cast and crew.
He was the kind of Yoda on the set,
mentioned Sarandon. Ragsdale remembered.
He had his video camera on his shoulder and he was shooting like family movies the whole time.
Sarandon remembered that Holland worked with choreographer Doreen Grossman to film a disco dance scene, allowing Burst's character to undergo a physical transformation.
She goes from this rather dewy, innocent-looking girl to this femme fatale. She kind of grows up right before your eyes.
The scene showed Amy finding out that Jerry was really a vampire. Principal photography. Filming kicked off on December 3, 1984, and wrapped up on February 23, 1985. Back then, Fright Night was Columbia's cheapest movie, and they didn't really expect much from it. Instead, they were putting all their energy into the John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis film, Perfect, which they were convinced would be a huge hit.
They never even came to the set,
Holland stated.
I was left alone. It was totally my film without studio interference.
There were a couple of hiccups while filming, like the time Ragsdale ended up breaking his ankle while sprinting down some stairs. They had to shuffle the schedule around, but they kept on shooting.
Nobody panicked. In fact, I think that the thing I'll remember most about this movie is everyone's spirit and humor.
The cast and crew really came together with the shared goal of creating an amazing movie. Early on in the production, Holland welcomed Fangoria writer Abby Bernstein to drop by the set whenever she wanted, and she definitely took him up on that. When it came to the wrap party in March, Bernstein had some thoughts to share. It's fun and pleasant, but it lacks the intense camaraderie of the set. Visual and makeup effects. Richard Edelin led the visual effects team that had just wrapped up on Ghostbusters, and that experience really helped out with Fright Night.
They had made all of their mistakes with how to do the match shots and everything on Ghostbusters with their huge budget,
Holland said.
So they really knew how to do the special effects as inexpensively and efficiently as it could be done at the time.
The toughest part of the makeup routine for the cast was definitely the contact lenses. Back then, they were made of hard plastic, and Steve Johnson would hand paint them, adding some glitter for flair, then lacquer and sand them down. The cast could only wear these lenses for about 20 minutes because they were super thick, painful, and made it hard to see. There was a set made for Stark during his chase of Peter and Charlie, but he kept stumbling on the stairs. Holland suggested he take one out, and that did the trick for the scene. Amanda Burrs had 3 sets made, but one pair was so painful that she tried to tough it out until it became unbearable. When she finally removed them, the crew realized they had forgotten to buff them. For a scene in Mrs. Brewster's bedroom, Jeffries kept his lenses in for almost 40 minutes, which left him with scratches on his eyeballs for months. When it came to the transformation sequences, Sarandon had to sit in a makeup chair for up to 8 hours. He wasn't a fan of just sitting there doing nothing, and since he had some experience with stage makeup, he offered to lend a hand. He did some stippling while the makeup team worked on the prosthetics for his face and head, and he also tackled the finger extension. Sarandon often jokes that the rubber fingers made bathroom breaks a challenge, so costume supervisor Mort Schwartz was always ready to lend a hand.
I said to Maury, "Thank you. Now I'll just use a coat hanger."
Ragsdale, who co-starred with Sarandon, remembered a time when Sarandon was in the makeup chair all day long.
And Chris said, "Okay," and turned around and went and took it off. It was amazing.
Ragsdale commented.
I would have gone through the roof, but he didn't. His will had been broken by that point.
The makeup process for Evil Ed's wolf transformation took a whopping 18 hours. While he was wearing the wolf head, the crew started pouring what they thought was methylcellulose into his mouth to mimic saliva. But when Jeffrey started complaining about the taste, Mark Brian Wilson figured out they had actually been using prosthetic adhesive, which was sticking his mouth shut. On Christmas Eve, while filming a scene where he was supposed to run down a staircase, Ragsdale accidentally tripped and ended up breaking his ankle. This caused a temporary halt in production until he was back on his feet.
Rod Martin, a trainer for the Los Angeles Raiders, came in every day to wrap the foot for me, and the shooting schedule was rearranged to put off the action sequences until it mended.
Ragsdale mentioned that many scenes were filmed while he had a cast on his foot, including the moment when Jerry storms into Charlie's room to confront him. For the shots where Charlie's feet were in view, the costume team made slits in Ragsdale's shoes, slid them on, and then covered the visible parts of the white cast with black fabric. In the scene where Jerry grabs Charlie by the throat with one hand, Sarandon was actually pushing Ragsdale on a furniture dolly at the same time. The effect of Jerry pulling the pencil from his hand was created using a spring-loaded collapsible pencil that was glued to his palm with an eraser tip loosely attached to the back of his hand. When he turned his hand to pull the spring-loaded pencil out, a monofilament wire off camera yanked the tip away, making it look like he pulled it right through his hand when he turned it back. So we go to the editing room. Steve Johnson, the FX guy, remembered an early edit, and Tom had put a reaction in the middle of it, ruined the entire shot. The crew tried to create the effect of Evil Ed's crossguard disappearing right on set, but it didn't go as planned at all. Back in those days before digital effects, Edlund's team had to rely on optical photography to pull off the trick. Filming the scene with the bat was a real challenge for effects expert Randall Cook, who kept accidentally appearing on camera while working the puppet. Things got even trickier when the bat attempted to bite Roddy McDowell's character, leading him to shove a bone into its mouth. Getting the puppet to actually bite was tough, and when McDowell yanked the bone too hard, it ended up breaking the bat's skull. They managed to patch it up quickly, but the repairs set them back 2 days before they could film more close-ups. One of the props featured in the movie was an early, or maybe even the first, vampire killing kit. Box office. Fright Night hit a peak with 1,545 theaters during its release. It raked in $6.1 million on its opening weekend and ended up with a domestic total of $24.9 million. It was the top horror flick of the summer in 1985 and came in as the second highest grossing horror film of that year, just behind A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Critical analysis. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times rated it 3 out of 4 stars, saying, "Fright Night isn't a standout film, but it sure knows how to have a good time not being one." Variety has some nice words for Sarandon's role, knowing he was fantastic as the vampire, charming and suave until his nails start to elongate and his eyes light up. On the flip side, Colin Greenland wasn't impressed in his review for White Dwarf number 75, suggesting, "We might rightly think that a film that shows such disdain for his characters also looks down on his audience." Home media. The original VHS released by RCA/Columbia Pictures Home Video in 1986 was a pan and scan version, wrapped in a paper cover featuring the poster art and sealed with a flap. Later, they released a budget version that had a picture of Evil Ed on the front. The movie was released on DVD by Columbia/TriStar Home Video in 1999. This edition came with a double-sided DVD showcasing the widescreen version on one side and a pan and scan version on the other, along with the theatrical trailer on both sides. It also included a pamphlet featuring the poster art, 5 photos, scene selections, and a short interview with visual effects art director John Bruno. Later, Sony Pictures Home Entertainment put out a version of the DVD that lacked the pamphlet and had a different logo but was otherwise the same as the original. In 2008, the film was bundled with Urban Legend on DVD, and in 2013, it was part of the 4-movie Thrills and Chills collection, Volume 3, alongside The Craft, Monster High, and Brain Scan. On December 13, 2011, Twilight Time released a limited Blu-ray edition of the film, with only 3,000 copies available. This version featured 2 theatrical trailers, an isolated music score, and a 4-page booklet with an essay about the film as bonus content. Then on January 20, 2015, Twilight Time launched a 30th Blu-ray edition Blu-ray, limited to 5,000 copies. This Blu-ray has since gone out of print and is now a coveted item among collectors. Finally, on February 12, 2019, Sony Pictures re-released the film on Blu-ray with a new 4K remaster, which included Remix 5.1 audio and the original stereo mix. While it didn't have the isolated score, the booklet, or some other special features, it did come with a few new extras that weren't part of the Twilight Time editions. On October 4th, 2022, Sony Pictures dropped the film on Ultra HD 4K Blu-ray in a Steelbook edition for the first time. The disc features the movie with a Dolby Atmos audio track, the earlier 5.1 track, the original stereo mix, Dolby Vision HDRR, and more than 13 hours of both new and existing special features. Documentary film. Chris Griffiths directed the 2016 documentary You're So Cool, Brewster, the story of Fright Night, produced by Gary Smart. Sequels and adaptations. After the huge success of Fright Night, both critically and financially, producer Herb Jaffe kept the rights to the characters and pushed for a sequel. This led to the release of Fright Night Part 2 in December 1988. Even though Holland was not thrilled about the reduced budget, he was still interested in the project. However, both he and Sarandon were busy working on Child's Play, so they couldn't take part in the film. Director Tommy Lee Wallace reached out to Holland for some guidance, and Sarandon even dropped by the set during filming. Stephen Jeffries was asked to return as Evil Ed, but he wasn't a fan of the script and chose to take the lead role in 976 Evil, which was filming at the same time. Burse looked at an early version of the script that included her character, Amy, but since she was tied up with her TV show, Married with Children, they created a new girlfriend for Charlie Brewster, played by Tracy Lynn. Ultimately, only Ragsdale and McDowell came back for their roles, and a fresh set of villains was introduced. Remake. In May 2009, DreamWorks announced plans for a remake of Fright Night, which hit theaters in 2011 under the same name. The script, written by Marty Noxon, who worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, loosely followed the original story. Charlie, played by Anton Yelchin, and his mom, played by Toni Collette, moved from Corvallis, Iowa, to a suburb in Las Vegas. Amy, played by Imogen Poots, is portrayed as more assertive and flirtatious. Evil Ed, played by Christopher Mintz-Plasse, has had a falling out with Charlie before the film starts. Peter Vincent, played by David Tennant, is a horror magician inspired by Chris Angel. The character Billy Cole was left out, and Jerry Dandridge, played by Colin Farrell, is no longer the lovesick vampire. Evil Ed describes him as the fucking shark from Jaws. In the 2011 remake, Sarandon had the chance to take on the role but decided to hand over the reins by making a cameo as a guy who gets eaten by Jerry Dandridge. Sarandon mentioned,
"It's not the original, and they didn't set out to make the original."
The team behind the remake, including the cast and crew,
were all huge fans.
Farrell had seen the movie a ton of times when he was younger and openly mentioned,
"I heard they were remaking Fright Night and went, oh God, remake Hollywood, so dull. And I read the script and really hoped I didn't like it, and I did."
Sarandon reminisced about the first time he met Farrell.
He walked in and he literally was almost shaking. He was so excited at the prospect of meeting his childhood idol. He gave me a beautiful bottle of wine and a DVD set of the Carl Dreyer Vampire. It was a really graceful and wonderful introduction.
At a reunion panel at Monsterpalooza in 2012, the original film's cast had a lengthy chat about the remake. Burt shared her thoughts.
As a standalone horror movie, it was very well done. It didn't lessen the appeal of the original. It was just more of a one-note film.
Jeffrey only caught the first 20 minutes before switching it off. Meanwhile, Stark and Ragsdale attended the screening and found out that they were
the only two people
Ragsdale was present. He appreciated an earlier version of the screenplay, but he wasn't really thrilled with the final product and found it confusing.
In that there was kind of a nastiness to
that evil Ed character really got the crowd going. The conversation went on for ages, and when Sarandon jumped in with a sarcastic remark to cut off Ragsdale, the audience erupted in laughter.
I'm sure there are some other questions about the original Fright Night.
In 2015, when Tom Holland was asked what he thought, he responded,
"Kudos to them on every level for their professionalism, but they forgot the humor and the heart. They should have called it something other than Fright Night, because it had no more than a passing resemblance to the original. What they did to Jerry Dandridge and Peter Vincent was criminal. Outside of that, it was wonderful."
Potential direct sequels. McDowell really enjoyed playing Peter Vincent and was keen to bring Holland back into the mix, so he arranged a meeting with Carol Cole Pictures chairman Jose Menendez to chat about making Fright Night Part 3. Unfortunately, before they could meet, Menendez and his wife were tragically killed by their sons, Lyle and Eric. This not only halted the sequel, but also affected the release of Fright Night Part 2, which ended up getting a very limited theatrical run before being tossed onto home video by Carol Cole's subsidiary, Live Entertainment. Fast forward to January 2017, Tom Holland shared that he was working on a Fright Night 3 novel and mentioned that he would secure the rights to the franchise by 2019 with plans to develop a third film afterward. Then, in October 2020, Holland revealed he was writing a direct sequel to the original Fright Night, tentatively titled Fright Night Resurrection.
I'm bringing back everybody I can. I'm calling it Resurrection because we've got to resurrect Billy Cole and Jerry Dandridge. Part of the issue with the attempts at sequels and remakes is that the movie itself was kind of a singular idea, and the follow-up needed to be more than just set in the same world. It needed to draw from the same set of inspirations and follow a similar thematic thread.
Novelization. In 1985, Tor Books released a novelization of Fright Night, written by Craig Spector and John Skip. They had just a month to adapt Holland's screenplay into a book so it could hit the shelves alongside the film. While the novel follows the movie's plot, it dives deeper into the characters and their dynamics. Unfortunately, the book has been out of print for many years, and its resale prices can be all over the place. Fast forward to September 8, 2022, when Fright Night Origins, a fresh novelization by Tom Holland and Jack Ulrich, came out. This book kicks off a trilogy aimed at expanding the Fright Night universe. Video game. In 1988, Microdeal launched an arcade-style computer game based on Fright Night for Amiga computers. Players take on the role of Jerry Dandridge, racing against time to turn his victims into vampires before dawn. Comic books. From 1988 to 1993, Now Comics published 27 issues of Fright Night comics. The first 2 issues adapted the original film, while Fright Night Part 2 got its own standalone graphic novel that wasn't part of the main series. The remaining issues featured original tales of Peter Vincent and Charlie Brewster as they faced off against various vampires and monsters. Although Amy Peterson and Billy Cole only appeared in the first 2 issues, Evil Ed became a recurring character, and Jerry Dandridge was brought back to life just as he was starting to gather an army of Parisian vampire prostitutes when Now Comics went bankrupt. Production stopped in 1990 after issue number 22, leaving the story hanging. After some corporate changes, 4 special 3D issues were released between 1992 and 1993, with 3 being reprints and 1 showcasing a never-before-seen story. In 2018, Tom Holland revealed a new comic series titled Tom Holland's Fright Night, The Peter Vincent Chronicles. Stage play. The official stage version of Fright Night had its world premiere at Carnegie Stage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on October 5, 2018. It was penned and directed by James Michael Sjoberg and brought to life by the rage of the stage players. The original lineup featured Dan Finkel as Charlie Brewster, Elena Christina Lazaro as Amy Peterson, Greg Crawford as Peter Vincent, Ryan Ott as Billy Cole, Brian Saponis as Jerry Dandridge, Amanda Ann Light as Judy Brewster, Corey Schaefer as Evil Ed Thompson, Dave Joseph as Lieutenant Detective Lennox, Ryan Frank as Donnie, and Edward Bates as Leon. Thank you for showing love to the video, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like the video by hitting the thumbs up and subscribe and share with your family and friends. This content is created by a true fan of horror for hardcore horror nerds. Your support is truly appreciated.